What is the ultimate weapon? It is not a bomb or a bullet. The ultimate weapon is one that can conquer an enemy without them ever knowing they were in a fight. It is a weapon that can turn a nation's greatest strength, the minds of its people, into its most profound vulnerability. In the paranoid heart of the Cold War, the United States Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, embarked on one of the most disturbing and deeply unethical secret programs in modern history. They were not searching for a new kind of explosive. They were searching for the keys to the human mind itself. They wanted to know, can a person be programmed? Can a mind be controlled? Can a soul be erased? This is the declassified and terrifying true story of Project MKUltra, a story of secret brothels, unsuspecting civilians used as human guinea pigs, and a government-sanctioned descent into the dark arts of psychological warfare. This was not a war fought on a battlefield. This was a secret war for the human mind. To understand how the world's most powerful democracy could authorize a program of such profound darkness, we must first understand the fear that created it. The year is 1953. The Korean War has just ended, and American intelligence agencies are reeling from a new and terrifying psychological phenomenon: brainwashing. American prisoners of war had returned from Chinese and North Korean camps, not broken in body, but in mind. They were publicly confessing to war crimes they had not committed, denouncing their own country, and spouting communist propaganda with a strange, hollow conviction. To the CIA, this was not just the result of simple torture. This was evidence of a new, terrifying Soviet weapon, a form of mind control that could turn a loyal American soldier into a puppet for the enemy. The panic that swept through the highest levels of the US government was absolute. In the zero-sum game of the Cold War, they believed they were facing a brainwashing gap. They were convinced that the Soviets were on the verge of creating an army of programmable Manchurian candidate-style assassins, and that America was defenseless. Their response was not one of caution or ethical debate. It was a primal, fear-driven reaction. We must fight fire with fire. We must master the art of mind control before they do, and we must do it by any means necessary. On April 13, 1953, this fear was given a name and a blank check. CIA Director Allen Dulles, a man obsessed with the covert and the unorthodox, officially approved Project MKUltra. Its mission was vast and terrifyingly vague: to investigate the research and development of chemical, biological, and radiological materials capable of employment in clandestine operations to control human behavior. The man chosen to lead this dark crusade was a brilliant but deeply sinister chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. Gottlieb was, in many ways, the perfect man for the job. He was a master of poisons and potions, a man who saw the human mind not as a source of consciousness, but as a complex chemical machine that could be reverse-engineered and controlled. He was given an almost unlimited budget and, more importantly, he was given permission to operate, completely outside the normal rules of scientific ethics and legal oversight. The project began by casting a wide, dragnet-style search for the key to the mind. The CIA began secretly funding research at over 80 institutions, including prestigious universities, hospitals, and pharmaceutical companies. They were testing everything: hypnosis, subliminal messaging, paralytic agents, and psychological torture techniques. But from the very beginning, Gottlieb and the CIA were obsessed with one substance above all others, a chemical they believed was the god key to unlocking and reprogramming the human mind, a powerful, reality-shattering hallucinogen known as LSD. Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA did not view LSD as a tool for spiritual exploration or therapeutic healing. They saw it as a chemical weapon, a biological crowbar that could be used to pry open the locked doors of the human mind. Their goal was to see if the drug could be used to induce confessions, to erase memories, or to create programmable assassins. To do this, they needed human subjects, and they were not going to ask for volunteers. The first phase of MKUltra experiments began in the places where society's unwanted were already kept: prisons, mental asylums, and addiction treatment centers. The CIA, operating through front organizations and bribed officials, began to secretly dose inmates and patients. These were the most vulnerable members of society, people with no power to resist, no voice to complain. They were perfect, disposable lab rats. The experiments were exercises in pure, clinical cruelty. In one infamous case, at a federal addiction research center in Lexington, Kentucky, the CIA targeted African-American drug addicts. They offered the men heroin in exchange for their participation in what they were told was a medical study. The men, desperate for their next fix, would agree. only to be locked in a room and given a massive, terrifying dose of LSD without their knowledge or consent. Doctors would then sadistically interrogate them, trying to see if the drug would make them reveal their deepest secrets. The results were not confessions. There were hours of nightmarish, drug-induced psychosis, all meticulously recorded by the agency. But Gottlieb quickly realized that testing the drug on already captive and marginalized individuals was not enough. To truly understand its potential as a weapon for espionage, they needed to see how it affected normal, unsuspecting people in the real world. This led to the most infamous and widespread phase of the project, the dosing of unwitting American citizens. CIA agents began to slip LSD into the drinks of their own colleagues at office parties, turning social gatherings into terrifying, impromptu psychological experiments. They dosed government secretaries, military officers, and anyone they thought might be a suitable subject. The goal was to observe how people would react under the influence of a powerful hallucinogen in a normal social setting. The results were predictably chaotic and dangerous, leading to at least one documented suicide. A CIA employee and biochemist named Frank Olson, who was working on these secret programs, was given LSD without his knowledge during a CIA retreat in 1953. 9 days later, in the midst of a severe psychological crisis induced by the drug, he fell to his death from the window of his 10th floor New York City hotel room. His death was officially ruled a suicide. For decades, his family was told he had simply had a nervous breakdown. They had no idea that his death was a direct result of being used as a human guinea pig by his own government. But even these random, reckless experiments were not controlled enough for Gottlieb. He wanted to study the effects of LSD in a more structured, yet still realistic, environment. He needed a laboratory that didn't look like a laboratory. He needed a place where he could lure unsuspecting men, dose them with drugs, and observe their every move without their knowledge. This need gave birth to the darkest and most surreal chapter of the entire MKUltra program, the CIA's secret LSD-fueled brothels. In the mid-1950s, the CIA established a network of secret safe houses in San Francisco and New York City. These were not your typical spy dens filled with maps and clandestine radio equipment. Instead, they were designed to look like normal apartments or, in the most audacious and disturbing cases, brothels. The CIA's goal was to create a controlled environment where they could dose unsuspecting individuals with LSD and observe the effects in a realistic social setting, all without raising any suspicion. The operation in San Francisco was codenamed Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA rented apartments and hired prostitutes to lure men back to these locations. The prostitutes were briefed on the project and instructed to secretly slip LSD into the drinks of their unsuspecting clients, behind two-way mirrors. CIA agents, including Sidney Gottlieb himself on occasion, would observe and record everything that happened. The victims were ordinary men who had no idea they were participants in a top-secret government experiment. They believed they were simply having a night out. Instead, they were being plunged into the terrifying and unpredictable world of an acid trip. Their reactions and behaviors meticulously documented by unseen watchers. The CIA agents were not interested in gathering intelligence in the traditional sense. They were looking for vulnerabilities, for the breaking points of the human mind under the influence of a powerful psychoactive drug. The ethical implications of these experiments were staggering. These were not willing volunteers. Their rights were completely violated. They were subjected to mind-altering substances without their knowledge or consent, often leading to severe psychological distress and long-lasting trauma. The CIA's pursuit of mind control had led them to commit what amounted to assault and battery on countless American citizens. The documents that have been declassified about Operation Midnight Climax paint a picture of utter moral bankruptcy. Agents wrote detailed reports on the progression of the drug's effects, noting changes in mood, behavior, and sexual responses. They seemed less like scientists and more like voyeurs, exploiting the vulnerability of their unsuspecting subjects for a twisted and ultimately fruitless pursuit of mind control. One particularly disturbing aspect of the operation was the potential for blackmail and coercion. The CIA was secretly filming these encounters, capturing intimate and potentially compromising moments of men under the influence of LSD. While there is no definitive evidence that this footage was used for blackmail, the potential for such abuse was inherent in the very nature of the operation. Operation Midnight Climax was a descent into a moral abyss, a stark illustration of the dangers of unchecked government power and the seductive allure of forbidden knowledge. The CIA, in its desperate fear of the Soviet brainwashing gap, had become the very thing it claimed to be fighting against, secretly manipulating and violating the minds of its own citizens in a clandestine war for control that ultimately failed to achieve its objectives but left a dark and indelible stain on American history. While Operation Midnight Climax was unfolding in the shadows of San Francisco, another, more insidious branch of MKUltra was operating in the bright, open halls of academia. Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA understood that to truly master the mind, they needed more than just a single chemical weapon like LSD. They needed a comprehensive understanding of human psychology, how it could be broken, manipulated, and ultimately rebuilt. To achieve this, they turned to the most brilliant and respected minds in the country, funding a vast network of psychological research at over 80 institutions, including renowned universities like Harvard, Stanford, and McGill. This was the quiet, intellectual face of MKUltra. The agency funneled millions of dollars through front organizations, like the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, to fund research projects that, on the surface, seemed like legitimate scientific inquiries. Psychologists, sociologists, and neuroscientists, many of whom had no idea their ultimate funding source was the CIA, were paid to conduct studies on topics like hypnosis, sensory deprivation, verbal and nonverbal communication, and behavioral modification. The CIA was not just conducting experiments, it was co-opting the entire field of psychological research for its own clandestine purposes. One of the most infamous of these university programs took place at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, under the direction of a highly respected psychologist named Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron. Dr. Cameron was a leading figure in his field, the president of both the American and World Psychiatric Associations. He was also a man obsessed with a radical and terrifying theory. He believed he could cure schizophrenia by completely erasing a patient's existing memories and personality, and then reprogramming a new, healthy one in its place. He called his technique psychic driving. Under the secret funding of MKUltra, Dr. Cameron turned the Allen Memorial Institute at McGill University into a laboratory for his horrific experiments. Patients, who had come to him seeking help for relatively minor issues like anxiety or postpartum depression, were subjected to an unimaginable psychological onslaught. They were put into drug-induced comas for weeks or even months at a time. While in this comatose state, they were forced to listen to a looped audio message, a simple phrase or command, repeated hundreds of thousands of times through headphones. This was the psychic driving, an attempt to burn a new thought pattern into the blank slate of their minds. To create this blank slate, Dr. Cameron used a brutal combination of techniques. He administered massive, unregulated doses of electroshock therapy, sometimes at 30 to 40 times the normal intensity, multiple times a day, and he subjected his patients to extreme sensory deprivation and prolonged drug-induced sleep. The results were catastrophic. Patients did not emerge cured. They emerged as human wreckage. Many suffered from permanent, severe amnesia, unable to remember their own families, their pasts, their very identities. They had to be taught how to read, how to speak, how to perform the most basic human functions all over again. The vibrant, complex personalities they had once possessed were gone, erased by a man who believed he was a pioneer of the mind. Dr. Cameron's work was not a secret torture program hidden in a dungeon. It was a fully funded, peer-reviewed research project conducted at one of the world's most prestigious universities. The CIA had successfully weaponized the trust and authority of science itself. They had created a network of unwitting accomplices in the academic world, turning legitimate institutions of learning into dark laboratories for their secret war. The victims of these university experiments were not just drugged or interrogated. Their entire sense of self, their very soul, was systematically and scientifically deconstructed. For over 2 decades, Project MKUltra operated in the deepest shadows of the American government, a ghost program known only to a handful of men at the highest levels of the CIA. It was protected by a wall of absolute secrecy and a maze of front organizations, but in the early 1970s, that wall began to crack. The political scandals of the era, most notably the Watergate crisis, had shattered the American public's blind faith in its government. A new, aggressive generation of journalists and congressional investigators began to ask difficult questions, determined to uncover the secrets that the intelligence agencies had been hiding. The first thread in the unraveling of MKUltra was pulled by the Watergate investigation itself. In 1973, in the midst of the chaos, CIA Director Richard Helms, fearing that the agency's darkest secrets would be exposed, gave a shocking and illegal order. He commanded that all documents related to Project MKUltra be destroyed. It was a desperate attempt to erase a chapter of history. Crate after crate of files detailing 2 decades of illegal human experimentation was summarily shredded and burned. But the cover-up was not perfect. One box of documents, approximately 20,000 pages of financial records, had been misfiled and was sent to the wrong archive. It was a single, bureaucratic error, a small oversight that would ultimately be the program's undoing. In 1974, investigative journalist Seymour Hersh of the New York Times published a bombshell report exposing the CIA's illegal domestic spying operations against anti-war activists. This report caused a political firestorm and led to the creation of the Church Committee, a U.S. Senate Select Committee tasked with investigating the abuses of the intelligence agencies. It was during this investigation that the misfiled box of financial records was discovered. The documents were a cryptic but damning roadmap. They didn't detail the experiments themselves, but they showed millions of dollars being funneled to universities, hospitals, and strange front organizations. The investigators, following this money trail, began to slowly and painstakingly piece together the vast, shadowy network of MKUltra. The public hearings that followed were a national trauma. One by one, former CIA agents were brought before the committee to testify under oath. The American public watched in horrified disbelief as the sordid details of the program were revealed for the first time. The secret dosing of unsuspecting citizens, the LSD brothels of Operation Midnight Climax, the horrific psychological experiments conducted by men like Dr. Ewan Cameron, the family of Frank Olson, the CIA scientist who had fallen from a hotel window 20 years earlier, finally learned the truth. His death was not a simple suicide, but the direct result of a secret government drug experiment. The revelations were a profound shock to the nation. This was not the work of a foreign totalitarian enemy. This was a program of torture and illegal human experimentation conducted by their own government against its own people. It was a story of a democracy that, in its fear of the dark, had become a monster itself. Sidney Gottlieb, the architect of the nightmare, was called to testify, but by this point he had retired from the CIA. On the stand, he was a picture of unrepentant denial. He claimed memory loss regarding the most damning details of the program. He defended his work as a necessary evil in the fight against communism. He showed no remorse. Due to the destruction of the most sensitive files and the legal loopholes surrounding national security, Gottlieb and the other leaders of MKUltra were never prosecuted for their crimes. The Church Committee hearings officially exposed and terminated what was left of Project MKUltra. The secret war for the human mind was, in theory, over. The investigation had revealed a story of unchecked power, profound ethical failure, and a stunning betrayal of public trust. But the true, full extent of the program's horror may never be known. The most damning evidence, the detailed records of the human experiments and the names of countless victims, had been reduced to ashes years before. All that was left were a few financial records, the fragmented testimony of retired agents, and the shattered lives of the thousands of people who were used as disposable pawns in a dark and paranoid game. The official exposure of Project MKUltra was supposed to be the end of the story. The congressional hearings, the public outrage, the promises of reform, all of it was meant to close the book on the CIA's dark war for the human mind. The program was officially terminated. The age of government-sponsored LSD experiments was over. But was it really? The story of MKUltra is not a relic of a paranoid bygone era. It is a timeless and terrifying ghost story, and its phantoms still haunt the hidden corridors of our modern world. The project was not a failure. While it may not have produced a legion of mind-controlled assassins, it succeeded in a far more profound and insidious way. It provided a blueprint, a proof of concept that the human mind could indeed be a battlefield. The tools have just become more sophisticated. The unseen inquisitor is no longer a shadowy chemist in a secret lab. It is the complex, invisible algorithm. The weapon is no longer a tab of acid secretly dropped into a drink. It is the vast, unseen ocean of data that we willingly provide every single day. The goal is no longer the crude control of a single individual, but the subtle, mass manipulation of entire populations. Think about it. The CIA's most ambitious dream in the 1950s was to find a way to influence a person's beliefs and behaviors without them ever knowing it. Today, that dream is a daily reality. Our social media feeds are perfectly curated rivers of information, designed by powerful algorithms to hold our attention, shape our opinions, and guide our consumer choices. The psychic driving experiments of Dr. Ewan Cameron, where a person was subjected to a looped message for weeks, seem primitive compared to the echo chambers of modern social media, where a single narrative can be reinforced thousands of times a day, creating a powerful, self-validating reality. The ultimate lesson of Project MKUltra is not that a government agency went rogue. It is a chilling reminder that the desire to understand and control human behavior is one of the most powerful and dangerous forces in the world. It shows us that when we are driven by fear, whether it's the fear of a Cold War enemy or the modern fear of losing an election, the line between protection and manipulation can become terrifyingly thin. It is a warning about the profound danger of unchecked power and the ethical compromises we are willing to make in the name of security. So, here is our final call to action. It is a call for a new kind of vigilance. The war for the human mind is not over. It has just become quieter, more digital, and more deeply integrated into our daily lives. In the comments below, let's discuss this. Where do you see the ghost of MKUltra in our world today? Is it in our politics, in our advertising, in the technology we use every day? Let's talk about the importance of critical thinking and digital awareness as the last line of defense for our own mental sovereignty. Because the story of MKUltra teaches us one final, chilling lesson. The most effective prison is the one you don't even know you're in.